Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I was reading, I don't know why I keep being compelled to tell this to you. You may have found it, but I was reading this morning an article about these nuns in Europe who have supposedly got kicked out of their long, long time home, their long time convent, and had to go to an old age home. And they rebelled and escaped the home and went back to their convent. And they have this, there's sort of this defiant, joyful article about that. They just decided they don't even care if it's abandoned. They're just going to make it work. They're not interested in the conventional solution to their aging trouble. They want to be in their home. And so they made a break for it. And in their habits, they just have these huge grins on their faces because they've kind of gotten away with it somehow. And I thought, I don't know, somehow this has something to do with whatever we're doing here. We're escaping sometimes the unnecessary practical solutions and feeling our way into the life that really seems like it's for us. So let's sit a few minutes just while we're arriving here. And somehow, I guess what I want to talk about today is just how we stumble or escape or find our way toward freedom. The koan I thought we'd sit with today is a verse. It's very old. The man who wrote it was actually a contemporary of Bodhidharma's. But Zen didn't really exist yet, so he couldn't officially call himself a Zen guy, but he kind of is. He really is. It says, "With empty hands, I pick up a hoe. As I walk, I ride the water buffalo. As I cross the bridge flows, the water is still." And like with most koans, they're not really aspirational. They're statements of reality that begin to invite you into something. And he's just inviting you into the free mind. With empty hands, I pick up a hoe. As I walk, I ride the water buffalo. As I cross the bridge flows. The water is still. You see, part of what he's getting at with this whole thing is that you don't need much of a you to be doing much or getting anywhere. And that there's this sense of when there's a me, there's so much at stake all the time. This is part of what I've been noticing and thinking about, is that I was using the metaphor of the old car in the write-up I did. But in a sense, what happens when you start to practice is you realize there's this self that you're carrying around and how incredibly sneaky it is, everything that it requires all the time. And sneaky in the sense that you don't even realize how much work you're putting in to prop it up all the time. Meaning that something very simple can happen. like someone just says, "How are you?" Or someone opens the door for you, or I don't know, something arrives, and let's just say someone says, "How are you?" And or someone told me a great story this week that anytime there's a lot of people in her community that travel, and every time someone says they're going on a trip, she notices this feeling to say, "Well, actually, I just don't like to travel right now, and I don't, well, that's nice for you, but," and all this activity that starts to show up, and we were exploring, well, what feels at stake? What all of a sudden do you feel compelled to have a reason or an excuse or an explanation or, but it's so sneaky. Someone says, "How are you?" And maybe I don't know, you're irritated, but you don't want to be. And so then all of a sudden you think, well, actually, I've had this terrible day, but it's fine because, you launch into a whole thing. And the person who's asking you, they may have an agenda, but they may just be wondering how you are. And what you start to notice is whatever agenda you have, that you don't want someone thinking that you're a complainer, or you don't want them thinking you're boring, or you've actually had a terrible day, but you don't want to admit that because you don't want them to, you see how quickly it sneaks in. And you don't actually even need anyone else for this to happen. You might just be sitting alone in your house or sitting on your meditation cushion. That's a very good place to notice it, as I'm sure you've realized. When all of a sudden you're defending against how long you should be sitting, or whether or not you're sitting still enough, or whether you should be doing something else, or um, whatever it is, all this effort that somehow goes into how it really was fair that you slept in this morning, or how, um, and what's interesting, the image of the gap is part of what kept coming up for me this time, because of its own accord, in meditation and outside, you'll have these moments where you just forget all that. And that's that sort of, with empty hands, I pick up a hoe. All of a sudden, I'm just, just watching the trees, or I'm just chopping carrots, or I'm just wiping down the counter, or I'm just feeling the water of the shower. And there's no one doing anything. Plenty might be happening of its own accord, but that sense of narrative and effort and the whole apparatus, there just starts to be more space all of a sudden, and you think, oh, that's nice. I don't have to be doing so much. And that second line, as I walk, I ride the water buffalo. Such a wonderful image, because you can see it. That, you're walking along the street and there's this giant creature without you even realizing it. You think you're making all this progress, and it's just somehow lumbering along, carrying you. And notice that too. As practice deepens, how much you're carried, or how much, when you don't put in quite so much effort, or aren't holding the reins quite so tightly, that things actually move along just fine most of the time. Often better, actually, which is a little depressing at first, but a relief after a while. And again, it's that sense that, just to sit here, birds arise, and thoughts arise, and feelings arise, and heartbeat keeps going, and somehow you get to be part of it. It's not requiring so much of that propping up. And the second part of this I've really been thinking about. So I would call that under the category of, I don't know, practice and luck. You just get these moments that appear of their own accord of freedom, and they're really nice. And you notice that practice, the more you practice, the more they seem to happen, which is great. But the second way that these gaps appear that I've really been noticing is how some way that propping up has been happening, that insistence on being or not being a certain kind of person. Something happens where that gets interrupted, not in the smooth way of just forgetting, but in some other more threatening sometimes way that all the things you've agreed with, you don't seem to be able to agree with anymore. Or all the ways you used to brush over something, you don't seem to be able to anymore. Or all the ways you didn't feel irritation or didn't feel sorrow or didn't include whatever it is that might be hard for you to include. That somehow that starts erupting from somewhere and causing you what seems to be like trouble. And things come flying out of your mouth that you never would have approved that you said. Or I was remembering a time when I graduated high school to get into college. I grew up in Utah and was desperate to find anybody who wasn't Mormon. Not that there was anything wrong with being Mormon, but pretty much everyone I knew was Mormon, and I wanted to discover something else. And I thought college will help. But college actually just meant married Mormons, which was worse, in fact. Again. And I don't know, I was very enthusiastic and had really grand plans about how all this was going to work out. And I would actually sit down with the academic planning book, and I would plan out all these course progressions for myself and how they would, the ways in which I was going to learn things and go out into the world. And, and I would come up with multiple plans, and I would have many years worked out at a time. The only trouble was I increasingly did not seem to be able to go to school. And I mean, really to a kind of absurd degree, where I would drive up to the campus and I would park, and no matter what I did, I could not go to class. And I had the time, and it was paid for. And I had a free ride, and it, like, every possible good explanation for just doing it was right there. And I absolutely, at a certain point, could not make myself go. And I had a huge amount of self-criticism at this time about this, and which was easily agreeable by pretty much everyone in my life, who thought, you're a smart kid, you've got a free ride, like, go to class. Couldn't go. And tried a different school, tried 2 different schools, tried different study plans, tried absolutely everything, could not go. And this would be those moments I'm going to call the gap. A gap appeared between who I thought I was and what I thought I should be doing, and what even made absolute perfect sense on almost every conceivable level. But reality was not in agreement. And when I mean include something, what I wasn't including was that my soul just felt like it was being crushed, and there was nothing that was alive or interesting about what was happening. And by sort of a strange grace, I met a mentor, and my life took on a different direction. And I couldn't finish school for a very long time. And I went through so many phases of explanations, in that same way that I'm saying someone asks you, how are you? And you feel this compulsion. Someone would ask me something and I'd say, well, next semester I'm going to get back, I've got a plan and I'm going to, decade went by or so, almost 2 decades went by or so. And finally it was time, and I finished in a year, and I was done, and I went on to graduate school. And in the meantime, this whole other life happened. And what's so curious about this territory for meditation is that there's this opportunity all the time. You hear it sometimes. There's a great story where someone says, just say it one true word. And in this particular story, this nun comes to visit a lonely monk. And he says, please stay for some tea. And she says, just say a true word of Zen and I'll stay. And he's so terrified of failure and losing her and whatever else he's terrified of, all the things that feel at stake in that moment, that he can't say anything. And so she keeps her promise. She leaves. And as that story goes, it was the best thing that ever could have happened to him to fail so spectacularly, because an opening, a gap, appeared. And in his case, the spirit of the mountain itself came down and taught him something. And he was open enough to receive it because he wasn't holding so tightly to doing it right, or to being a good monk, or to saying a true word. And the thing about Zen and the true word is it's always just, it's right here. It's right here. You think, oh, I can't say that. Can't be that. Can't be. And that gap is really where there's a moment of not being able to prop that old self up or keep it going. And picking on myself again, this happened to me recently. Many of you were here probably a couple weeks ago where I was talking about this noise that could be heard from my apartment in New York and my not being able to sleep. And one of the ways I can prop up a self is that I can handle things. I'm a fairly robust creature. I can handle things. I'm a good sleeper. I had all sorts of things. I realized I'm sort of, and a number of circumstances, the noise being kind of the most obvious and insistent. I saw you guys on Sunday, and by Tuesday morning, I felt like I was about this close to a nervous breakdown because I just hadn't slept and all sorts of things. The more I didn't sleep and the more I didn't do anything differently, the more the world itself just, absolutely everything started to be the noise. And I'm standing in my kitchen and I just start crying, just start weeping and can't stop. And my partner says, why don't you go home? Why don't you get the car and why don't you just go home? And this is where, for using our old car metaphor, the wheels are flat and the fender's coming off and the alternator's gone and, nothing's. And I think, no, it's okay. I can do it. I just, and she says to me, why don't you go home? And I say, well, but you're stressed and I need to be here for you. And meanwhile, I'm not going to be here for anyone. This is very apparent to me, or very apparent to her, less apparent to me at that time, because somehow I'm still propping I'm still going for, I can do it. This was one of the best ones. This shouldn't be that big of a deal. Somehow this shouldn't be that big of a deal. It shouldn't be bothering me the way it is, right? And you can feel the immense violence in this. I shouldn't be hurt the way I am, or I shouldn't be tired the way I am, or I shouldn't be upset the way I am, or I shouldn't be afraid the way I am. And so I'm going to somehow keep propping that self. And the gap opens. And if you step inside, which I did, something new can actually happen. Which in this case, I can realize my partner's actually fine. It will be better for her if I go home. Everything can begin to move again. Something new can be discovered. And the rest of the day, I actually, because of New York, if you park long term, you're not allowed to get your car out easily. You're trapped. And so they said, well, we can have your car out in 8 hours or something. And I thought, okay, fine. Even the hint, even just including where I actually was, and this is a real thing, the situation started to change. The noise wasn't as bad. Doing the rest of everything I had to do that day was actually easier. I was still tired, but that forcing of something just desperate to be included in my own psyche wasn't hamstringing me in the same way. It wasn't taking all of my energy to hold it off. And so new things could start to happen. I got in my car and I escaped, and I came up here, and now the noise is different. It's, meaning I don't need to make a pronouncement on anything. The noise, my relationship, myself, now I can't handle anything. Now I'm falling apart. Just somehow moving with what appeared, including what's asking to be included. Everything then can begin to change. And I guess what's another thing that's interesting about this is that, we really don't know what will happen when you include the thing you think you shouldn't. If you let yourself, if you let yourself spectacularly fail, if you let yourself get upset with someone you love, if you, was talking to my partner yesterday, actually, because she's started this lunatic art thing after having a career that did something completely different. And she can tell where she is in her painting. She's clinging to something, and it's getting more and more and more stale, what she's been clinging to. She doesn't know what to do next, and she doesn't know how to let go. And that's that gap. That I know how to succeed, or I know who I am. I know even how to be unlovable in this one direction. I know the certainty of that. But to try something different, I have no idea who I might be or what might appear. And so much of these 3 verses, with empty hands I pick up a hoe. As I walk, I ride the water buffalo. As I move over the bridge flows and the water is still. They're about letting reality reveal itself when we're not holding so tightly. And the poet Thomas Tranströmer seems to have a real feel for this territory of what happens when the constraints that we're usually putting on things so much. And it happened, we're not trying to do it. Just have a death grip on things without realizing it. But how things start to behave unusually when that starts to loosen. So I'm going to read you a couple of his poems. This one's called Breathing Space, July. The one who's lying on his back under the tall trees is also up there within them. He's flowing out into thousands of twigs, swaying to and fro, sitting in an ejector seat that lets go in slow motion. The one who's standing down by the docks squints at the water. The docks age faster than people. They have silver gray lumber and stones in their gut. The glaring light pounds all the way in. The one who's traveling all day in an open boat over the glittering bays will fall asleep at last inside a blue lamp, while the islands crawl like huge moths over the glass. You can tell he's just somehow, he's keeping company with things and not worrying so much about him, whatever he is or isn't. The world starts to do strange things. The bridge flows, the water stands still. And I give you a contrast poem. This is called Vespers. In your extended absence, you permit me. This is by Louise Gluck. And you can tell her attitude toward the Tao is a bit different in this poem. In your extended absence, you permit me use of earth, anticipating some return on investment. I must report failure in my assignment, principally regarding the tomato plants. I think I should not be encouraged to grow tomatoes. Or if I am, you should withhold the heavy rains, the cold nights that come so often here, while other regions get 12 weeks of summer. All this belongs to you. On the other hand, I planted the seeds. I watched the first shoots like wings tearing the soil, and it was my heart broken by the blight and the black spots so quickly multiplying in the rows. I doubt you have a heart in our understanding of that term. You who do not discriminate between the dead and the living, who are in consequence immune to foreshadowing, you may not know how much terror we bear. The spotted leaf, the red leaves of the maple falling, even in August, in early darkness. I am responsible for these vines. So you can tell a little more I and the trouble it causes and how it either puts you in some way of needing approval or at some odds in some way. And trans trauma says this great thing that when we're not doing that, and that gap, that stuck, that unknowing is a real thing. But if we somehow move into it, Marie Howe told us this great story about just being absolutely stuck with writing. And so she started writing her brother a letter. And then suddenly that turned into this incredible poem that she has. You see, I don't have to actually know what I'm doing. It's better if I don't. I just start moving with empty hands. I pick up a pen and I start moving with what's here. which is, in her case, I miss my brother and I don't know what to do. And suddenly that takes on life. And Trans-Traumer says of this buried territory, fantastic to feel how my poem grows while I myself shrink. It grows, it takes my place, it pushes me aside, it throws me out of the nest. The poem is ready. So often things just want to come through us. And if we get too tangled up in certainty about what should and what shouldn't, the I grows large, but the poem shrinks. So let's sit for just a little bit. I have one more poem I want to read you, but I think I'll wait. Oh, Marie is here, says John. Where is Marie? There she is. Marie, you want to say anything about this territory I'm talking about?
Oh, I could say so much. It's where I live. I live in, I can do this, I can control this. I love to hear that story back, Tess. Thank you. Because it reminds me of how, giving up is how important giving up is. I'm back teaching poetry to people at a college and a graduate program. And I've been so willful, so determined to turn this course into something that's really difficult, and not enjoying it at all. And finally, I realized, a friend also reminded me that that actually I don't have to do very much. I can just, encourage them and be there. But I've just done a huge turn because I realized that all I have to do is to sort of love them and respect them and show them poems and suggest they try this and try that. And in other words, I sort of gave up my plan, which was very rigorous. But I don't think it was working. With in the spirit, I was doing it. The spirit was, I know what you need to know, and you need to know it now, and do it. So I keep forgetting that if a poem ever comes through me, it really comes when I give up. And when I think I know what I'm doing, it just never happens. So happy to be reminded, Tess. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Marie. That's about as good as it gets for these 3 lines of this koan, I think. Thank you. Let's sit. With empty hands, I pick up the hoe. As I walk, I ride the water buffalo. As I cross the bridge flows. The water is still. John Tarrant, you have anything you'd like to say?
It was great to be here. Nice to hear Marie telling us about creative process. The thing you can't teach that we always want to teach, And I noticed that there's stuff on perfectionism everywhere right now, which seems to be on the topic. Like there's a big article in the New Yorker, and I'm sure parents are just clipping this and sending it to their college kids and things like that. So it's sort of fun. And there's some way in which wanting to determine the outcome somehow prevents the outcome. So I'm just really aware of that at the moment, and aware of like sometimes, you know, we need to strive to get somewhere, but there's a lot to be said for just letting the universe carry us. And I suppose it's the Tao, we would say, it carries us. But it's kind of hard because we can't quite determine the goal when we're trying to just let ourselves be carried. But there's a line in the Tao Te Ching about the true traveler has no fixed destination and no set time of arrival. And I know when I first started meditating, everything was about my set time of arrival. Am I enlightened yet? And now there's this wonderful thing of just letting things unfold and just waiting and letting, not even waiting, but just letting the universe hold me and carry me and prop me up. I was really sick a while ago, as some of you know, and so I took some time off, which was good. And which is why Tess is teaching tonight, actually, and which is also good. And I noticed that that whole thing about if you're sick, are you supposed to be achieving something? Maybe you're just trying to achieve not dying, but whatever it is, it doesn't seem it. You know, if you just let the universe let the current carry you and find its way in the rapids and between the rocks, the marvelous thing. And in meditation, it doesn't mean, I don't know what it doesn't mean, but it means truly showing up to be here. For me, is what it means. Truly showing up and letting the universe have me, and that's a very nice thing. That I too am part of the universe, and the universe is part of me. And with empty hands, I take hold of the plow. Grandmaster Fu. While walking, I ride the water buffalo. And the water buffalo, I guess, was a sort of community bus in the rice paddies. Little kids would jump on it and get a ride across the paddy, or just enjoy, pretending they were driving. And so lots and lots of, the old Taoist master playing a flute while riding on a water buffalo and not trying to get anywhere. While walking, I'm being carried like that. So I must say I really like that. I like the idea that the universe is unfolding us. And it's a nice thing. So, excuse me. And the universe is making me cough. And it's none of my business, So there's that. And we're all just being carried. So I must say I just love that. So thank you.
Thank you. One of the stories I read about this guy, Grandmaster Fu, as you said, was that, as I said, right around the time of Bodhidharma, and he actually encountered the same Emperor Wu with very similar results. He tried to show the emperor something by, giving a sermon and just knocking on the and getting down. And he said to the emperor, "Do you understand?" And he said, "Absolutely not." And so he but when he got married very young, and he had 2 sons, and at 24, someone just wandered up to him and said, "You and I took the same vow in one of the first Buddha's houses in antiquity, and your robe and bowl still remain in the palace of heaven. When will you return there?" Someone just comes up out of nowhere to tell him this at 24. And somehow he just thought, you're right. And he started practicing, and, his life took on this different direction. And so just that idea of being carried. But one thing I've been thinking about in what you were saying, John, is how, definitely in some way we're talking about according with the Tao, but how there's an idea sometimes that if I accord with the Tao, that things will go well or be easy, and that that's absolutely not the case. But that you do start to develop a feeling for the rightness of things, even the difficult things that you think, oh, this is my life. This isn't a mistake. It's not the wrong thing that I ended up here. And sometimes it's when things are going very easy that you actually can tell, something, I think I'm done with this. I think something new is happening. And so there's some deeper accord beyond just ease that we're feeling for, I guess, or learning to have a relationship with. Allison Atwill, you have anything you'd like to say?
Yes, yes, things do not necessarily go well. Um, I I was really struck with the image of the empty hands and that feeling of entering into whatever the current situation is with the empty hands, so that everything is available, all of the response, and then also what is it like when I have something in my hands, and what might that be? And last week we had a series of things not going well, and as the more things that began to be the disasters that we came into, the more I noticed how much I was holding on, and what that felt like. So the first thing that happened was a refrigerator went out, and we had this ancient, it was originally an ice box, so it's incredibly beautiful and soulful refrigerator, but it's very temperamental. And the people that know how to fix it are as strange as the refrigerator, and you often can't get a hold of them. So the refrigerator didn't work for a whole week, and we started to sort of rearrange our lives around. It was a little bit like camping in your own house. I got used to that. It was kind of fun. So empty hands, I'm a Zen master. I can manage this. And then the next thing that happened was late one night, just as we were about to go to bed, we hear this weird banging behind the washer and dryer, and we look back there, and I listen, and it's the terrible um, sound of a rodent caught in something. So the rodent was in the dryer vent, and we couldn't do anything that night, so we just had to go to bed. But I was terrified that it would gnaw its way out and escape, and so I took a blanket and pried it underneath the door so it couldn't squeeze into my room. And still, empty hands, things are fine, doing great. Next morning, turn on the water, and the terrible, like, this is for me, this is the absolute worst thing that could ever happen, is there's no water. The water has gone out again. And, I need a shower. I'm like, some people need Ambien, some people need, I don't know, sake, some people need exercise. I need a shower. It's the thing that soothes the tiger is water. So my mind started to grab something, and the thing that it was looking for, I just couldn't. I felt like I was being, I don't know, like somehow crushed, like you were saying, that the feeling of being crushed, that I could no longer hold up my cheerful attitude. And the mind starts to reach for blame. Whose fault is this? It's the water company's fault. It's the person who put in our new water pump a month ago. It's this, and then the pain of how it's a kind of disabling of my capacity to respond because I'm doing something. I'm down in the basement instead of calling the pump people. I'm in some sort of basement where I'm writing my legal treatise on why they're at fault and why this shouldn't be happening. I really liked Louise Gluck's kind of parsing out the getting rid of everyone, all the extraneous blame, and going straight to the top. Like, it's God's fault. It's so marvelous because you see then how it doesn't help. I mean, I think that's part of what practice begins to show you is the move to blame and the move that this shouldn't be happening are the very things that turn the world into this very thick material that's made mostly out of concrete, of which is opposed to me and I'm opposed to it. And so, yeah, with open hands, with nothing in my hands.
That's great. Thanks. You brought to mind, it's a very short little poem I somehow stumbled upon, but just had the interesting move toward blame and trying to hold on to things. Keep this is just called incommunicado. Um, you used to have such beautiful handwriting, my mother tells me, and sighs, as if this one gift, had I kept it, would have spared me all the grief and trouble I now spend my time writing about, filling notebook after notebook in a hurried, indecipherable hand. I myself can't make out poems I wrote 5 years ago and left untyped. They've enclosed themselves in the confusion they came from. Phrases cohere briefly, then disappear in a blue scrawl like bird tracks across a muddy field, made by homing pigeons, perhaps earthbound and lost, their urgent messages undelivered. And part of what I loved about it is there's no mistake in those poems. The hand that wrote them was empty in a sense. They're arriving of their own confusion and they're disappearing into their own confusion. And actually, that's fine. We need not blame the handwriting or anything else. It's just the way of the world. And the ones that don't disappear and find their roost are doing just fine too.